Date, July 16. In 1054, Cardinal Humbert, representing the Catholic Church delegation, entered Hagia Sophia. While preparations were being made for the liturgy, he placed a document in front of Constantinople Patriarch Michael and then left Hagia Sophia, and subsequently left Constantinople to return to Rome. The document Humbert placed before the Patriarch declared that the Patriarch had been excommunicated by the Bishop of Rome, that is, the Pope. On the same day, the Patriarch convened a church council and excommunicated those who had excommunicated him. Thus, July 16, 1054, was recorded in history as the date when the Western and Eastern churches officially separated from each other. Historians call this the Great Schism. But it wasn't just a single event that caused the separation of the two churches. The roots of the events actually stretched back hundreds of years. Throughout the Middle Ages, one of the most fundamental points of debate among Christian clergy was which church held universal supremacy. The bishops of Rome, that is, the popes, argued that supremacy belonged to the Western Church because one of Jesus' apostles, Peter, had come to Rome, founded a church there, and was martyred there. According to the papacy's claim, Peter was the first bishop of Rome, and those who came after him sat in the papal office as his representatives. Jesus himself had pointed to Peter as the founder of the church. In addition, Paul, who played a major role in spreading Christianity, had also come to Rome, like Peter, and was martyred there. According to the Western Church's claim, the bones of both were buried beneath a church in the Vatican. In other words, the Church of Rome was built upon the graves of Christianity's two greatest martyrs. To the papacy, all of this was proof of the universal supremacy of the Bishop of Rome. In contrast, the Eastern Church explained its supremacy in a more worldly way. Constantinople was the capital of the empire and the residence of the emperor. In pre-Christian Roman religion, emperors were considered the head of religious authority. This tradition continued even after the capital of the empire was moved to Constantinople in the 4th century. Emperors such as Constantine, Theodosius, and Justinian held authority in religious matters. For the Eastern Church, the matter was quite simple: wherever the emperor was, the church there should be superior to all other churches. This ongoing struggle for supremacy throughout the Middle Ages played an important role in driving a wedge between the Eastern and Western churches. The issue here wasn't really about whose arguments were more reasonable; both churches simply wanted power over the other churches. So far, the conflict seems more political than religious. But there was also a cultural dimension. By 1054, several fundamental differences had existed between the two churches for many years. Some seemed minor, but over time they contributed to the division. For example, in the Eastern Church it had become tradition for clergy to wear beards, whereas no such tradition existed in the Western Church. Priests could marry in the Eastern Church, but not in the Western Church. Then came the biggest problem between the two churches: language. When the Roman Empire was divided in two in 395, the borders that formed were not only political but also cultural. Latin culture dominated in the West, while Greek, Hellenic, culture dominated in the East. The official language of the Western Church was Latin; in the Eastern Church it was Greek. From the 5th century onward, even emperors began speaking and writing in Greek instead of Latin. Over time, language turned into a major problem between the two churches. They could not follow each other's theological debates. For instance, a letter sent to Constantinople in the 5th century remained unanswered for months in Rome because no one could translate it. The same was true in Constantinople. Letters from Rome written in Latin were often ignored or considered unworthy of translation. By the 9th century, some Eastern clergy were claiming that the Pope spoke the language of barbarians and therefore could never have authority over Constantinople. Another point of contention concerned the doctrine of the Trinity, the formula of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In the early years of Christianity, emperors convened a series of councils to reach agreement on divisive theological issues. The first of these was held in Nicaea, Iznik, in 325 under Emperor Constantine. The formula of the Trinity was clarified at the Council of Constantinople in 381, the Holy Spirit proceeded from the Father, from God. However, at the Council of Toledo in 589, the Western Church changed this to say the Holy Spirit proceeded from the Father and the Son, from Jesus. They did this to emphasize the importance of Jesus and protect him from heretical views. At first this did not create a problem between the two churches. Due to the language barrier, the Eastern Church only learned of the decision years later. When they did learn of it, their stance was clear: to them, this was heresy. Historians call this issue the Filioque controversy, Latin for, and from the Son. In the early centuries of Christianity, there was no strict hierarchy among the churches, their relationship was generally one of exchanging information. However, with the decisions of general councils, 5 churches were considered superior and gained certain rights over the churches in their regions: Rome, Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem. Eastern clergy called this system the Pentarchy, rule of 5. In the early years, the bishopric of Rome was given precedence over the others. But over time, emperors increased the importance of Constantinople and tried to win over the other regional patriarchs to their side in order to gain more religious authority. This inevitably deepened the divide between East and West. In the early years, popes had to bow to the political power of emperors. Even becoming pope required the emperor's support. This situation continued for several centuries. In 726, Eastern Roman Emperor Leo III banned the veneration of images and icons of Jesus and the saints, an action known as iconoclasm. Pope Gregory II strongly opposed this and wrote a letter excommunicating everyone involved in the movement. However, the messengers were arrested in Sicily, under Eastern Roman control, so the letter never reached Constantinople. In 751, when the Lombards captured several cities in northern Italy and began threatening Rome, a new chapter opened in Catholic Church history. The Pope asked the Frankish king, Pepin the Short, for help against the Lombards. The pious Pepin gladly accepted, marched into Italy with his army, defeated the Lombards, and went even further: he donated the lands from Rome to Ravenna to the papacy. Thus, the Pope became not only the sole religious authority in the West but also the ruler of a state in central Italy. This was a turning point in Christian history. The process continued in 800 when Pepin's son Charlemagne was crowned emperor by the Pope. At that time, Empress Irene, a woman, sat on the Eastern Roman throne. The widely accepted view was that an emperor must be male. With Charlemagne's coronation, the emperor now resided in the West, and theoretically supremacy had passed to the West. Although Irene was deposed in 802 and replaced by Emperor Nikephoros, neither the papacy nor the Franks agreed to give up their claim to the imperial title. This naturally deepened the separation even further. However, the event that finally snapped the ropes occurred shortly after the Normans conquered southern Italy. The Normans gradually took control of large parts of southern Italy, which had previously been under Eastern Roman rule. But a problem arose: the churches there continued to follow Eastern rites. In 1053 the Pope issued a decree ordering these churches to switch to Latin rites, otherwise they would all be closed. This decision was met with fury in the East. In retaliation, the Patriarch of Constantinople ordered all Latin churches in the city closed. The disagreement between the two churches suddenly escalated into a full diplomatic crisis. To find a middle ground, the Pope sent a delegation led by the French Cardinal Humbert to Constantinople in June 1054. From the very beginning, negotiations between Cardinal Humbert and Patriarch Michael went poorly. Humbert handed the Patriarch a letter advising him to submit to papal authority. Moreover, the Cardinal's condescending attitude during the meetings greatly irritated Michael. After that, Michael refused to receive the Roman delegation for a long time. The cardinals remained in Constantinople for several more weeks. Finally, fed up with the treatment they received, Humbert entered Hagia Sophia on the morning of July 16 and placed the bull of excommunication, sealed by the Pope, on the altar in front of the Patriarch. This was the last straw. With the support of the Emperor, the Patriarch first excommunicated Cardinal Humbert and then the entire delegation. With this decision, the Eastern and Western churches were now completely severed from each other. At first, ordinary people were not greatly affected. In regions where Western and Eastern Christians lived together, they continued their good relations. But over time, the tension between the churches began to affect the people as well. With the Crusades, disagreements between the peoples intensified, reaching their peak in 1204 when the Latins captured Constantinople. Negotiations for reconciliation between the churches over the years mostly ended in failure. The problem between the Eastern and Western churches remains unsolved even today.